Hey everybody, I'm here with Markus Zusak, the author of Bridge of Clay. So excited to be here with you at Book People.
Thanks for having me, Xander.
It's wonderful to meet you. Welcome to Austin. So I've got some questions for you.
Yeah.
So there's a pretty sizable chunk of time between The Book Thief and Bridge of Clay. What were you doing all that time?
Oh, nothing really. Sometimes you want to say something like, I wrote the book in the last year, and for the first 12 years I was doing nothing. I was just surfing and doing other things. I think there are a lot of factors that went into it taking 13 years, and all sorts of jokes aside, I think after I'd written The Book Thief, I'd always been putting Bridge of Clay off because I always knew it would be my most difficult book, and so finally there were no other books to write, and I went, right, this is it, it's time to face Bridge of Clay. And it was the right time to do it because The Book Thief had been, a kind of book that surprised me and surprised people, and so it was time to take the next risk, and I think that's why it took 13 years. I was trying to write something better than I actually am. And that's not too bad the place to be. It's better than settling for just writing the same thing over and over again.
It's good that you challenge yourself, and
yeah,
something that I hope you're proud of.
Yeah, I think I always said what I realised with The Book Thief was that I'd written 4 books before that really meant something to me, but that book meant everything. And I thought, I only want to write books that mean everything to me from now on. But after 13 years, writing another book that means everything to me, maybe it's time to go back and just write a book that means something to me again. So we'll see.
That's a good attitude to have. So you talked about how The Book Thief surprised you. Did it surprise you? In which ways did it surprise you? Just by its success, or by your how you made it happen?
Yeah, well, it was supposed to be a 100-page short novel, and so as you know, and as it got a bit out of hand and turned into a 580-page or 560-page book, and but then I thought that it would be my least successful book because I couldn't, I imagined picking that up in a bookstore and going, oh, well, I don't really want to read that. And, it's always like that when you've written something, you're so close to it. Sometimes writing a book is a bit like looking at a photo of yourself, and people say, oh, it's a really good photo of you. And you look at it, and you're looking at it, you go, what, are we even looking at the same photo? I mean, look at my nose. Or whatever it is, and so I just thought that book would sink without a trace. And but at the same time, I thought, well, that's probably the best I can do, and no matter what happens to it. And so often now, I think I remember when it got rejected, for example, originally when it was shown to publishers in England, no one wanted to publish it. And I thought, no, just give this book 5 years and then we'll see. So now I pretty much, that's my mantra for everything. Is just give it 5 years and we'll see how it goes.
That's so funny. If you were a book thief, what would be the first book you stole?
Yeah, that's a very good one. I'm trying to think of the first book that I actually did steal, because I know I stole it from my high school library, and it's because I didn't have a library card.
Oh,
and,
wow.
And so I just thought, I'll just take this, I'll bring it back, and then I don't think I ever did take it back. And so I still feel a bit guilty about that to this day. I don't know which book I'm trying to think. It's often something quite practical. I think it would probably almost be the first book I'd see, because I'd be so nervous about getting caught that I'd just quickly grab something and whatever I would do, whether it was stick it up my jacket or whatever. But so probably the first book I saw, and then I'd probably get home and be really disappointed. That's how hopeless I am.
I feel the same way. That's how I would do it too. How did you decide for Liesl to be a book thief?
It's funny, every book you write needs a little bit of luck to get you started. Yeah. And I had these stories that my mum and dad told me about growing up in Germany and Austria during the Nazi era and things like that. And then I had this idea about that I was writing with some kids at a school, and I got them to write about colours in the sky. And I wrote with them, and I just wrote these 3 little short stories about, and it turned out to be about 3 deaths from death's point of view. And I thought, oh, I might just put that in that book that I'm setting in Nazi Germany. And then I had a page of writing about a girl stealing a book in modern-day Sydney, where I live. And I just went, oh, maybe I'll just throw that into that book that I'm setting in Nazi Germany. And it was just as offhand a thought as that, not realising at first. I mean, I came to then, of course, think about how, you know, books were burnt in Nazi Germany, and that during wartime, you know, they say war and death are like best friends. So I knew there was meaning in the ideas, but you start to explore those as you're writing the book, and so that was how I decided. It wasn't, you know, often your best ideas, they're not deep ideas, they become deeper as you're writing the actual book. So often they're just little pieces of luck that you're smart enough to hold on to.
That's very interesting. If you could go any place in the world right now, where would you go?
I think in a situation like this, so I would probably, at this point in time, I would just say I would go home, and that's because, you know, I've got kids and I've got dogs, and you know, and so for sometimes you just want to be there, and you look forward to that moment where, you know, you see everyone for the first time, and then after an hour you're yelling at everybody, but that's all part of the fun as well. So you know, at the moment, you know, one of our dogs has been quite sick, so I'm sort of looking forward to going back and giving him a bit of a cuddle, you know, so that'll be nice.
What was the writing process for A Bridge of Clay like?
Well, I think we can agree that it was quite long, and at first I was worried. I think I was trying to make everything too perfect, because it's about a character who wants to make something great, and you know, there are a lot of characters in the book, and so I think I was wanting everything to be really precise, and then after a while, I just thought, well, after about 10 years, I thought, just get your hands dirty, you know, don't worry so much about making everything perfect, you know, just stop. You know, sometimes you're working really hard at working really hard, and then you just go, just stop that, just get your hands dirty, and then things will come to you, and that's how I ended up finishing it.
Hey.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, good,
so
thanks.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I'm Markus, anyway.
I'm Ava.
Okay, nice to meet you.
Okay, one question I have is, do you believe in writer's block?
I think I more call it writer's lack of faith, because it's not like I can't write anything. It's just I don't like anything that I've written. You know, that's that, like that. And that's what it is. And so I'm more searching all the time, searching for what it is. I know what I want, but I'm not quite sure how to get it. You know, and so to me, writer's block is more a case of, it's not that so much that you can't write anything. It's just that you're not satisfied with what you're doing, and you know, and I think that's one of those things where if you want to be a writer, that's something you've just got to get used to.
Okay. Another question is, what's your favorite underappreciated novel?
Favorite underappreciated novel. It's interesting because often, like, I'll tell people what one of my favorite books is, and it's What's Eating Gilbert Grape by Peter Hedges. And it has been for a long time, and it was even made into a really good movie, and then a lot of people don't know it, and so I'll say that it's both one of my favorite novels in general, but also one of my favorite underappreciated books as well.
You want to keep going?
Oh, okay. How much research did you do before you wrote The Book Thief?
This is one of my, I want to say favourite questions, but it's one of the more interesting things that when I started writing that book, I didn't do any research. I started, I wrote, and then when I felt the pull to do research, or I didn't feel like writing, then I would research. And I did do, and then I started writing and then I went, okay, now I want to do some research. But at first, the first research I did for the Book Thief was basically my childhood, which makes it sound like I grew up in Germany in that time, and obviously I didn't. But it was my childhood of hearing my mum and dad tell me stories about that time, and so I felt like I knew that world. And they were such good storytellers that when I started writing, it was like scratching something open in my mind and reaching in, and I could pull that world out. And but so at first I had bombs coming down in the wrong year, and all this sort of thing. But and I knew that it was just more a case of I just wanted to have the story and to have the characters right, and that was as important as research. And then I'd feel the need to do more research, and then of course all the way through I continued researching all the time, and then of course I went to Munich to check all my facts and check everything, and you know, it's a hard one because you want to get I even researched, for example, the seasonal habits of apple trees in that part of Germany, so that when Liesel and Rudy and all these kids are stealing apples from the farms, that it's the right apples in the right season, and you're not going to get a letter from Bill from the South Australian Apple Growing Association saying, yeah, those would be the wrong apples. You know, so it's every little thing that you do try to get right.
That's so cool.
Can you describe Bridge of Clay in 10 words?
Okay. Oh, well, I can't count I don't know how many words it is, but I'll just say I think it's about the idea that stories are what we're made of, and we start becoming who we are long before we're even born, and that to me is what is underneath the story. Probably about 50 words. So it's a big book. It's a sizable book, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's hard to fit everything in 10 words.
Yeah, but it's a good way to start because with 10 words, because having a boundary kind of helps sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, this is kind of a broad question, but what do you think makes a good story?
I have to think about this one because often we don't know. Often we just know. Like you say you read a great book or you see a great movie or something, and you come out, and at first you can't really describe why it was great. But I think this is and this can come back to my appreciation of What's Eating Gilbert Grape. That's a novel that I think proves the idea that great characters make great books. So I think it's great characters that make good stories. And of course, and to have great characters, your characters have to have really good moments. And so someone asked me yesterday, you know, how do you get your characters to work? You know, how do you build characters? And I talked about some characters where I've had trouble making them come to life. And it's because I was endlessly describing them, what they looked like, you know, and how they spoke and all this sort of thing. And then I realised, no, they're not doing enough. You know, they're not doing anything. So your characters are defined by what they do, and so you're looking for moments, you know, in a book, and that's what makes the characters good, which makes the story good. So that's my feeling anyway, because I don't really know anything.
Characters have to do stuff.
Yeah, it sounds so fundamentally like such common sense, but it's amazing how easily it can be to forget those sorts of things.
That's so fascinating. Do you have a favorite library or bookstore around the world?
One of my favorite libraries is the library near where I grew up, which is and it's called Sutherland Library, and it's just a suburban library, but it's got a really broad collection of books that can be really useful, and that's the library I walked into, and I was going to do research for the Book Thief about soccer players or football players, because I thought the kids would play soccer on the street and try and commentate while they played and sort of imitate their heroes. and I knew it would be very hard to find something on that. But Facing Out was a book on the Olympics, and there was a picture of Jesse Owens on the cover, and I thought, oh God, I don't need any soccer players or anything like that. I've got one of the great icons of the 20th century, and I saw Rudy, one of the characters in the Book Thief, pretend like wanting to be Jesse Owens, and that defined that character, and so that's probably my favourite library, and bookstores around the world. You know, I've been to. There are so many favourite ones, and in America, I mean, I know I've been to Washington, to DC a few times. Politics and Prose is a favourite bookstore of mine. You know, this is the first. I actually haven't seen this bookstore. We're just in the catacombs.
Yeah.
And so, you know, by the end of tonight, this will probably, you know, Book People will probably be a favourite as well, because, you know, I just love pretty much every independent bookstore that there is. So, and everyone speaks so highly of this one. So, looking forward to seeing it, you know, from the front, and yeah, what it's like on the floor. So, yeah, we'll see how we go.
Yeah. You want any more?
Ooh, okay. Do you have any unfinished, like, stories or unpublished stories?
Yeah, so the first 3 books that I wrote weren't published, and I'm grateful for that. And for a couple of reasons. One is that if they had been published, I would have thought that what I was doing was good enough, because they were rejected by publishers or not read or whatever, and it pushed me to do better and to try to write something undeniable, and you know that's what would get me published. Whereas I think I saw books that were similar to mine, those first 3 books, getting published, and I don't think it necessarily was great for those authors, because they thought, all right, I'm good enough now, I've made it, you know. Whereas I had to keep pushing myself, and so I'm grateful for that. And then books between books as well, where I'd had a book published, I tried to write my next book, I wrote it, I finished it, and I just went, that book just doesn't feel right. There's just something not quite right about that book. And so I never actually even came back to it. So, but often I start many things that don't work, like, and then some of the things in that book become useful in the next thing you write. So there was a dog in a book that I wrote that was about a writer, and he had this dog, and the dog sat at the door, and he wouldn't even move when you opened the door, so the dog would move with the door. And so the dog's name was the Doorman, or the Doorman. And then I started writing the book before the Book Thief, I Am the Messenger. And it was about this hapless sort of guy and his friends, and I went, that dog belongs in this book. And so I just pulled him out of the failed project, put him in there, and he fit perfectly. So it's not only books that haven't been published, stories that you haven't finished, you know, it's characters that you've started working on, and then they don't really work there, but they might work over in another project.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah, because everything you do is just, like, nothing works straight away.
Yeah.
And so you have these things that you go, oh, well, that didn't work, that's no good, but it can work. So and just shows you that you can sit around worrying, or you can actually work. And that's what I'm often telling myself. You can worry, or you can work. And if you work, even if you don't get anything that seems useful, it might be useful somewhere else down the road. Or you'll have one image, or one character, or one sentence that will be useful next time. You know, so no work is actually wasted, but a lot of the worrying is wasted. So, but I have to learn this lesson over and over again. You know, and I have to get to a point where I'm a bit angry at myself for not working. You know, I'm worrying too much before I sit down and say, right, this is it. You've actually got to do it.
Wow, that's so fascinating.
That's such
You
a
should be
creative
motivational speaker.
Not really, but it's just true, I guess. And it's one of those things that I've learned over the years, I suppose. Yeah.
And what do you have in the works? Do you have anything in the works? Are you...
Yeah, it's a little bit like, it's a bit, say you've gone away and you're driving back home, and say you're driving back towards Austin, and you can see the buildings in the distance, and they're just blurry shapes. You know, you're still 45 minutes or an hour away, and that's kind of how I feel at the moment. I can just see the blurry shapes of the book that I'm thinking about, and it's a perfect example where Bridge of Clay had a different narrator for the first 6 or 7 years that I was writing it, and her name was Maggie, and I ended up cutting her out of the book and using a different narrator, but she may have a story of her own.
I was just about to ask, is she going to make an appearance?
So 6 or 7 years of hard work, you'd think there'd be some material. Although she was telling Clay's story, but I think I've got a story that's just for her. So we'll see. But so I'm starting to see that story, and I think, and then you start to ask yourself, well, how big do I want to make the world around that idea? So I'm more likely going to start that next year, because this year's a bit of a heavier travel year, and so I'm looking forward to starting and being home a lot, and so that'll be nice, and that's when you start to live in two worlds again. You live in this world, but you live in the world of the book you're writing, and when it's working well, you feel like you could roll out of bed in the morning and land in that world, you know, and that's always a nice way to feel like things are going.
That's awesome. Any last questions? Or?
I don't think so.
Awesome.
You said some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Oh no,
Thank you
thanks
so much.
No, thanks for having me.